Welcome to Designing Contextual Instruction. This is the second in the Youth and Adult Pathways Microgroup series. My name is Lynn Vella, and today is the 11th of December. This is the second of our series. The first of the series was for November, and that was building strategic partnerships. Designing Contextualized Instruction will be available through December, and then in January we have Integrating Career Planning and Counseling into Adult Education. In February, Sustaining Adult Career Pathways, Funding, Leadership, Policy, and Professional Development. In March, the topic will be Using Data for Continuous Improvement. April, it will be business engagement and supporting the education pipeline, and in May, developing effective bridge programs. My name is Lynn Vella. I'm the Career Technical Education Coordinator in Campbell County School District, and I am actually employed by the Campbell County Board of Cooperative Higher Education Services, which means basically that I work both for the school district and for the community college. I'm the SME for this particular pathway, and I've been a keynote speaker and a workshop presenter at many different venues. In my former life, I have written national, state, and local grant proposals. I have taught at the junior high, senior high, community college, and university level, and right now I am helping to design some career pathways and career academies. We have 3 career academies here in Campbell County School District, which is in Gillette, Wyoming, by the way, and we are currently working on our 4th academy. Today's topics will include definitions of contextualized instruction, student and teacher engagement using contextualized teaching and learning, and I will refer to that as CTL quite a bit of the time, instructional design and development, designing and delivering engaging projects using contextual learning, and integration with career pathways and career academies. I will also have a list of some resources and some support that you can gain about contextualized teaching and learning, and I noticed this morning that there is a list of several different areas where you can get some information about contextualized instruction, and I think there were many, like maybe even 1,000 resources. So there are lots of definitions of contextualized instruction, and I have only listed 3 of them right here, but I would like to read to you some of the definitions that I had that I've been able to collect from different places. The first one is, what is contextual teaching and learning from the Texas Collaborative for Teaching Excellence? And what they say is, according to contextual learning theory, learning occurs only when students process new information or knowledge in such a way that it makes sense to them in their own frames of reference. In other words, their own inner worlds of memory, experience, and response. This approach to teaching and learning assumes that the mind naturally seeks meaning in context, that is, in relation to the person's current environment, and that it does so by searching for relationships that make sense and appear useful. Building upon this understanding, contextual learning theory focuses on the multiple aspects of any learning environment, whether it's a classroom, a laboratory, a computer lab, a work site, or a wheat field. And all of these definitions basically are pertaining to all learners, not just adult learners or just youth, but all learners. The second one is, what is contextual learning? And this came from CORD, the Center for Occupational Research and Development. They say contextualized learning is a proven concept that incorporates the most recent research in cognitive science. It's also a reaction to the essentially behavioralist theories that have dominated American education for many decades. The contextual approach recognizes that learning is complex and multifaceted, that goes far beyond drill-oriented stimulus and response methodologies. And the third one is contextualized learning, a faculty primer from the California Community College Consortia. And I'd like to spend a little bit more time on this one because it really gets to the need for contextualized teaching and learning. It's kind of from a post-secondary view around student preparedness for college and the workforce. And they say that nationally, 40% of all college students and 60% of community college students enroll in at least one developmental course. The issue of weak academic preparation has serious implications for America's workforce. While America's human capital declines in its ability to compete academically, the rapidly changing labor market is raising its demand for higher level skills. Employers are increasingly demanding broad academic skills in reading, writing, and computation for career advancement for occupations that only used to require job-specific knowledge and training. For educators to successfully respond to the needs of this changing workforce, it's their job to work with students to develop their foundation skills and improve their ability to think critically and to transfer skills from one context to another. This requires a shift from the student viewpoint, from being the information receiver to becoming the information constructor. And the teacher needs to be the person who creates the conditions that support that learning environment for the students. So within this paper, the definitions that they give for contextualized instruction are: CTL is identified as a promising strategy that actively engages students and promotes improved learning and skills development. Or CTL seamlessly links the learning of foundation skills and academic or occupational content by focusing teaching and learning squarely on the concrete applications in a specific context that is of interest to the student. And I think that is the key. It needs to be of interest to the student. The U.S. Department of Education, Office of Vocational and Adult Education, characterizes CTL as a conception of teaching and learning that helps teachers relate subject matter to real-world situations. So again, this applies to all learners, not just adult learners, but also to youth. In my opinion, and it's only my opinion, I would imagine, that building relationships is probably one of the best keys to promote the reason that you need to have contextualized teaching and learning. When you're building relationships between the teachers and the students, or the community and the students, or whomever it happens to be, you need to figure ways that you can build trust, actively support and reinforce each other, listen to each other, honor the commitments that you make to each other, and praise and flatter, because that allows the learning process to take place. An example I wanted to give you was when I was working on my doctorate, I was in Phoenix, and I was taking a course in statistics from Arizona State University. And I had an instructor who had to drive all the way across town, got to the class, put all the formula up on the board, and didn't really talk to the students at all. And we started out with 42 students, and we ended up with 9. There was no relationship that was built at all between the teacher and the student. And probably if I hadn't had to have the class for my doctorate, I may not have stayed as well. But there wasn't this dynamic of teachers and students being able to talk to each other. And that's, I think, a very important aspect of any teaching and learning. And contextualized teaching and learning allows that to happen because it's based on real-world instruction. So I have a friend who is in South Dakota. His name is Wayne Zako, and he has traveled throughout the United States and Canada training teachers and administrators in how to make classroom experiences more rewarding for students and teachers both. He has actually trained over 60,000 teachers, and he has come up with this stage process for how people learn. And he is using these as his examples of the learning process. Called CE, concrete examples or experiences. This is where the teacher talks to the students about a certain concept, and the students talk about their own experiences around that particular concept. The second one is called reflective observation, and in reflective observation, the students think about it. AC is abstract conceptualization, where the students think about what if we did this, what if this would happen. It's the what if. And then the last one is AE, which is active experimenting. And that's where the students try out new things, do projects, do experiential learning, and that sort of thing. And they build that on what they've already learned. So in order to be able to actually do contextualized learning and teaching, it helps to know how the students are going to learn. So here are the stages that Wayne talks about. And you'll notice that the one is not necessarily where you would think it would always be. It's on the right-hand side, and it sort of forms a circle. And the circle is sort of a continuous circle, but lots of times you have to go back, and sometimes you get stuck in certain places. But these are some of the things that Wayne says about these particular stages. Stage one is important to help students see the meaningfulness of what you're teaching. How can you help them connect what you're teaching to their present-day life experience? How can you see what they're teaching is relevant, what you are teaching is relevant, meaningful, and useful? This is the stage where the students build on their own real-world experience. Stage two teaches the students critical information that you want them to master during the lesson. How can you help them understand facts, theories, and ideas you are teaching while encouraging them to connect this new information to any prior knowledge that they have on the subject? This is a stage where the students assimilate what you're teaching into a more complex understanding of the subject area. In stage three, it is important to allow the students an opportunity to practice using the information that you've taught and that students are to master. How can you provide them time to try using the facts, theories, and ideas in real ways? This type of practice is beyond workbook, it's beyond worksheets, and it is beyond contrived step-by-step lab procedures. This is a stage where students work on projects that require them to use their assimilated knowledge to see if they can make use of the content that's been learned. And the last stage, stage four, it's important to have students demonstrate what they've learned and how they can use this information in the future. How can you provide them time to demonstrate, present, debate, teach, or role play what they've learned throughout their practice? This is a stage where students have practiced with the content to the point that they know it well enough that they can present it or teach it to someone else. There are 2 pages that have basically the same kind of information, and after this presentation is recorded, It will also be available on the website about a day, 24 hours later. And also there will be some tools. And some of this is incorporated into the tools. And so when you get those, this will help you to work through the learning process and how you incorporate contextualized teaching and learning into the whole process of learning. So the things that Wayne says about these, this is a little more information about the stages and what he calls the stages of learning. The first one is the diverging stage. This is a time when we want to view situations from many different points of view. When you're in this stage of the learning process, you're determining why it is important to learn a new concept, a new strategy, a new idea, technique, or method. During this stage, it's important to brainstorm. And we'll have some more information on brainstorming later in the presentation. You need to brainstorm possible connections between what is learned and what is important in your life. Students who have a strong preference for this stage are more likely to spend time observing others, learning rather than taking action. They also enjoy personal connections of working together with other students. The second stage is the assimilating stage, the time when we want to absorb all the information that you've found. And during this stage, the students may prefer to work alone, and students who like that kind of learning will probably excel right here and may get stuck here. So you may have to help them to move into the next two stages. The third stage is the converging stage. That's a time when you want the students to take the information that they've learned and try it out. See if it works. Does it make sense? Can I use it to improve my current situation? All that kind of stuff. They're pragmatic learners usually, and in a learning situation, they're interested in knowing how things work. This is especially interesting if you have an academy in engineering, which is one of our academies that I'll talk about in a little bit. They too enjoy working alone or in a small group, and at this stage of the learning process, it's time to practice what you've learned and find out if something works the way it's supposed to work. And then the accommodating stage, or stage 4, is when you take everything that you've learned and you put it into some kind of application. You take your newly learned information and relate it to other stages of your life. And the students that do this usually enjoy going out on their own and trying to discover new things and to try out new situations, try new theories, and they usually have a pretty good sized social circle. So they have a lot of friends that they want to work with. So you can, when you get to this piece, you can usually have a lot of students working together. And by the way, those last two pages will be pages that have worksheets with them or some kind of tool that you can use to help you to do some planning. So when you start to design and develop your projects, basically what is happening is you're taking the contextualized learning, in other words, the learning that applies to something, and you're putting that into some kind of a project or experiential learning. So it's important that you decide at the beginning who's going to do this. And it may be that you have a principal or another administrator who says, okay, everybody in the school is going to be doing this. So everybody's going to be using contextualized instruction. That's a huge change. And when that happens, there's probably going to be some pushback from some of the teachers who are very used to going into their own classrooms and closing the door and talking about concepts that only apply to their particular subject matter. So it doesn't really look like real life very much, because we don't shut the door and just talk about math and then go someplace and talk about English and talk about social studies and so forth. So it depends on how you're going to do this. If you're not going to have everybody doing it, are you going to just use contextualized learning or contextualized instruction in a fusion or an integration of math and science and social studies into career and technical education? Or are you going to link some classes? Or you might do career pathways or career academies. And so you need to know ahead of time where you're going with this. And then when you start changing the coursework, especially if you have integrated classrooms or you have interdisciplinary work, when the coursework is being changed or designed, you need to have time for these people to work together to develop the coursework that is going to be changed. And it is quite a change to move from a general kind of math to a math that is specific to a theme. Same thing with English or social studies or whatever. And so they actually work more closely with the theme or whoever is doing the work around the theme, possibly career technical education teachers, if it happens to be that your academy is, say, in engineering or whatever. So in order for you to make sure that moving from individual teachers being in their rooms kind of by themselves, you need to make sure that it is going to, the curriculum is going to be rigorous and it's going to be relevant to the students. And one of the ways that you can make it be academically rigorous is to make sure that you are thinking about the standards that are required by your state or your local school district, or it could even be nationally. The Common Core has been adopted in many states, and so Common Core standards would be a point of reference for a lot of people to make sure that they are reaching the academic rigor that they need to. In many states, such as Wyoming, we have state career and technical education standards that we need to address, and the National Association of State Directors of CTE Consortia has actually designed and produced a set of core standards that are address each of the 16 career clusters. So you might use those as well. And then sometimes your district has its own career standards that you, or its own district standards that you need to address. But those are the ways that you keep right on target where you need to be when you're redesigning all of your coursework or part of your coursework. So you start with brainstorming. So you want to integrate career contextual teaching and learning into a project or experience, like experiential learning, going out in the community and doing something. And so you need to follow the steps of the learning process so you don't just jump into something before the students are ready. But you need to set the stage and then let the students decide on the project, or there might be some kind of a need within the community that the students want to work on. For instance, it might be that the students would want to work with a group, say if you have a group in your town called Master Gardeners, that they might want to do a community garden somewhere within the area. And this kind of project is really very good because in some communities they do this as a place where the homeless people can come and get vegetables and whatever they have growing in the garden. Or it could be that people from the community can have a part of the garden and can grow their own vegetables and fruit if they don't have a place that they can do that at their own houses. So there could be a lot of reasons that you do this particular project. But while you're doing it, what doesn't matter what the project is, while you're doing that, they need to be doing some brainstorming verification. So they're going to do a mind map or a diagram of what they're doing, what they want to do, what the project is, what they're going to learn. They could make lists, they could write narratives, whatever. So they'll probably need to write up some notes. They could do a journal that you have during the whole project, and so they would be actually graded on their journal that they keep. Make sure that you know within the project what it is that you want your students to know and what they will be able to do. You need to decide what kind of grade levels or disciplines or courses and majors. Think about this garden project. If you were to do a project like this, you would probably want to include the agriculture teacher to do the actual planting or to test the soil of whatever needs to be done. You would encourage the English teachers involved to help with it as far as writing about the project or speaking. They might need to go to the city council and talk about what the project is that they want to do and see if they can get that approved. You might also want to have a marketing teacher who's going to work with the newspaper to make sure that that everybody knows what the project is and the reason for doing the project. You might want this to be only for seniors, or you might want it to be for an adult class. It might be an adult college agriculture class. The other thing, besides wanting to make sure that you have addressed all the standards and that you have high enough academic rigor within the project, because a lot of people are going to say this is just playing, that the students aren't learning what they should be learning. But if you're addressing the standards within your project, then you should have plenty of ammunition to tell people that you're doing a good job and that the students are learning what you want them to learn. They also need to have an adult connection within the community, and that can be anywhere from the mayor to the engineers to people in business and industry, or it could even be their parents or some other significant person within their life. Another person who I have used her research, I've used her projects, and I've actually had her come to Gillette to talk to the teachers, especially when we started doing career pathways and career academies. She is a person who has designed and delivered a lot of projects concerning using contextualized teaching and learning. Her name is Michelle Swanson, and she is from Oregon. Swanson began project-based learning professional development consulting through Jobs for the Future. She served as a lead curriculum consultant on the Benchmark Communities Initiative in Boston. She was an associate of the Autodesk Foundation, where she was instrumental in the growth of the largest project-based learning conference in America. She began extensive development of K-12 tools for project-based learning and worked with many schools and districts and even colleges to effect positive instructional change and the achievement gains that come from that work. One of her papers is on rigor and relevance, designing and delivering engaging projects. And within this paper, she uses the model of the 6 A's project design. This is another of the tools that you will find available on the website later on. But the 6 A's of project design that she talks about are academic rigor, authenticity, active exploration, applied learning, adult relationships, and assessment. And academic rigor starts with the essential questions, and those of you who are doing Common Core will be very familiar with this concept. Essential questions are talked about a lot during when you're talking about Common Core standards. The essential question could be something like, why are people that are living in X community, state, town, whatever, suffering more from certain types of cancer than people in other communities? And then what type of project could be developed to answer that question? One of the tools that is going to be on the website is called Habits of Mind, and that will help you a lot with answering some of these questions. It's a very interesting paper, and I think you will enjoy it. Another of the questions could possibly be, what factors affect the quality of water, and how do we measure those factors? And a very broad one is, what does it mean to be an American? That project would be quite a bit different than a project where you would go out and build something or redo something, because this one would be a project that would not necessarily take a lot of field study, but it could, depending on what the students decided that they wanted to do. So again, these are some of the standards that are to be addressed, and there are also national and state standards for language arts that the language arts teacher would probably be addressing, national and state standards for mathematics, which your math teachers would want to be addressing, and then some states have adopted the next generation science standards that science teachers could be using. The next question is, or the next area that she talks about is authenticity. And so this is, where in the real world might one see the problem or question addressed by the project tackled by an adult at work or in the community? And an example of that is we have a community college in Gillette where the academic transfer part of the college is on one side of a creek, and the technical education portion or building is on the other side of a creek. And so the engineers, city planners decided that there needed to be a bridge so that the students could get back and forth from one place to the other. And so students could go and watch what happened and talk with the engineers about what they're doing, who they had to contact, what kind of engineering feats did they have to do, what kind of soils did they have to sample in order to make sure that the bridge was going to be stable. And then after they had done all that, they might then decide that they wanted to do a project there as well. So the students decided that they wanted to do a water feature in the area, the grassy area that was by this bridge. So they had already seen what the engineers had been doing and the administrators of the college, and so they kind of had their own ideas about what they needed to do. So then they decided that this project was going to be sort of an offshoot, and they were going to ask people that had been helping with the bridge to help them as their adult mentors. So when you're doing a project like this and you have the whole student group that's working on it, it's important that you monitor and adjust all the time, because otherwise it might become a project that one or two kids are working on, or one or two of the adults are working on. These were actually college students that were working on this. And you need to keep finding out, are the students engaged? Are they excited? Are they motivated? Are they getting bored? Are they connecting to other people? What do you need to do if they're bored and they are not interested anymore? You probably need to bring them back together again and decide what you need to change and what kinds of activities you could put into it that would help them to be more engaged in the whole process. Like some of the students might not like digging in the ground, but they liked writing papers, or they liked giving presentations. So the audience that would be appropriate for this. In this particular case, the students had to go to the city council because the city actually owns the land where the college is, and they had to talk to the mayor. And but their audience is also the administrators at the school, a local land board, the county commissioners, and if you have projects that the high school students are doing, it might be their parents, and also employers in the town, and obviously the engineers. So the field-based activities that the project required the students to conduct could be a variety of things depending on what it is that they're doing. So with this particular project, they had to learn what they had to do to get permits, what kind of zoning they had to have, if they had to do anything to the ground to make sure that it was stable or that it was okay to put a water feature into, or was all the water just going to drain right out of it. They had to figure out how they were going to acquire the water, what was the source of the water, and also are they going to put statues in it, are they going to put, were they going to put fountains in it, and is it simply for aesthetics, or was it also for maybe ducks or geese or other wildlife to use? So was it aesthetic, or was it actually providing some sort of use? The methods and sources of information that the students should use during these projects could start at the beginning of the project, could be during the project, or even at the end of the project. One of the classes that we have here, the students did a lot of interviewing of senior citizens. They wanted to put together a documentary around our county and what kinds of things brought people to this county. Were they part of the mining industry? Were they part of the agricultural ranching industry? And what kinds of changes they'd seen during their lifetime. And so interviewing was huge. And then we had a TV broadcasting class that taped the interviews and put that together into kind of a little documentary. So the other thing that they needed to do with the water feature was they had to interview a lot of people from the college to decide where they wanted their little water feature to be and what kinds of things they would like to have included within that. For applied learning, you want to probably bring the students back together fairly often so that you can debrief and find out how they are doing, if they're learning what you want them to learn, and then change if you need to, monitor and adjust all the time. And the students will hopefully apply the knowledge that they learn to a complex or semi-structured problem, which is like the bridge. When they were observing the building of the bridge, they had to realize that there were a lot of things going into the building of that bridge that were not necessarily just building. There was a lot about, was it going to be okay to be right there? Was it going to be in a migratory pathway? Was it going to be stable because of the kind of soil structure that there was? They had to learn a lot of different things like that. And so before they started on their own project, they had to have a lot of background. The competencies that the students developed or could develop during a project are creativity, building and construction, planning competencies. They need to be able to write, speak and listen, and persevere. They need to make sure that the project gets done. They have to be risk takers, and they probably have to do some research. There are probably many other things that many other competencies that they will be able to exhibit. And one of the probably most important parts of the whole applied learning thing is the fact that students need to develop self-management skills. And I think many teachers will tell you that lots of times students don't get very good grades because of the fact that they don't hand in their homework. A lot of students don't do time management very well. They don't know how to set short-term and long-term goals, and this is a place where they can practice those skills. Especially if someone like the city council or the county commissioners or the mayor or whoever it might be has set a deadline for them, and they have to actually complete a project by a certain deadline. So learning how to be responsible about completing a project is very, very important. And so setting short and long-term goals is an objective. When the students are working on their pre-planning, they should start thinking about what kind of adults they would have to be a part of this and what those roles will be. So most of the projects say you need to have at least one other adult that has expertise in this area to work with the students, but it can be way more than that, or it can be a person who they just visit with online or by email or on the phone. It can be a whole group of people, like a Rotary Club. We have a project in Nicaragua that we do with a group of students where they actually are working on some water projects. And so the adults in Nicaragua are working side by side with the students, and even though they don't speak English and most of our students don't speak Spanish, it is still really heartening to see how they work together and how they can address the problems of not having clean water in Nicaragua. And the role that the adults play can be many and very varied. They can be, depending on the project, they can be a mentor, an observer, an audience, an expert. They might sit in on a demonstration, or they might help with assessment. But it depends on the role. And the students can contact people however they need to, but a personal contact is really the best for this. And so they can actually explain what contextual instruction is to the adults that are involved with these projects. The next A is assessment, and assessment needs to be planned from the beginning so that there are no surprises. What kind of criteria are you going to use to measure student growth? And most of the time the students will tell you, well, you just have to see if the project is completed. Well, not necessarily. There are a lot of things along the way that need to be assessed before you ever get to the completion of the project. So things like what planning did the students do? Did they do good organizational kinds of things? Did they think about solving problems? Did they think about reviewing the project and see what needs to be changed or what the next thing is that they need to do? But they have to keep the standards in mind at all times. So how was contextual instruction involved? So since this is the thing that we're talking about mostly, the students need to be aware of what contextualized instruction is and how it helps them to apply what they're learning to the rest of their lives. And then when it comes to the end of the project, the students probably will want to prepare some kind of an exhibit, or let's say in the case of the water feature. What the students did was to have ribbon cutting, and so they had the Chamber of Commerce come and cut the ribbon, and then the students talked about what they did, why they did it, what they learned, and there were a large number of adults who were there to see what had taken place. But it could be a lot of different things. It could be a presentation for the mayor. It could be a presentation for some administrators. It could be a lot of different things that they do. They could actually even write, sometimes they can do these without actually doing a field project. But generally speaking, a field project lends more credence to the whole learning process. So we generally think that a project is pretty important for the students to do. So once again, we're going to talk about implementing contextualized learning, project-based or experiential learning, and the relationships that students, whether they're junior high students, high school students, college students, or adults, the student hopefully has been able to establish some very meaningful relationships with a variety of people. For instance, they have probably, especially if they worked on a project together, they have built some pretty strong relationships with other students in groups, in teams, in probably partnerships, or even in teaching. And then the relationship with the instructors should be pretty strong, and they should be on a basis where they feel like they're trusted and that they can talk to each other. The students will have built relationships with the administrators, which is probably a little bit different than the relationships that they've built with the instructors. They have hopefully talked with their parents, possibly not the adults, but the students in high school have talked with their parents and told them about the projects that they're doing and why they're doing them, and the same with the community and with business and industry. Lots of times doing these projects actually leads students to jobs within the community, especially if there are teachers or employers from business and industry that are involved with the learning. Another place that contextualized instruction is almost a must, and that is within the design of career pathways or career academies. Simply by their nature, career pathways and career academies are theme-based. And so here's a great place that you can put your academic teachers and your CTE teachers together in interdisciplinary teams, and they can work on particular themes. Here we have 3 career academies. We have one in hospitality and tourism. We have another one in transportation distribution, and another in energy and engineering, and we're starting one in health and human service. So each of these is a particular theme. The English teachers write about those themes. The math teachers do problem solving around those themes, and so forth. So it's a great way to use experiential learning, hands-on learning, learning in the community, and absolutely using contextualized instruction. The resources that I have used within this presentation are listed here. Both Michelle and Wayne have assured me that they would be more than happy to work with anyone who would like to call them or email them, so their addresses are here. I will also be putting those on the website. And also, when you're thinking about resources, don't forget that there are a lot of online resources. Museums are great, personal storytelling, libraries, newspapers, service organizations. There are lots of areas where you can get ideas and topics for need for the community or for the school, and be able to do some great project-based learning and contextualized teaching and learning. So for our short time together, We have talked about the definition, some of the definitions, and the purpose for using contextualized instruction, who should be involved, what are the essential questions around instructional design, what the role and responsibilities are of all the players, students, employers, administrators, parents, everybody, designing projects around Michelle Swanson's 6 A's, and theme-based career pathways and academies. The next steps are to post the webinar. We will be posting some additional resources. There will be a discussion board that's available, and if anyone wants to get in touch with me, my email is lvelle@ccsd.k12.wy.us. I'd like to thank you very much for sitting in on this presentation today, and have a great day.